With the amplification of his talents, it could actually provide Lin with 21,000 stats. This was even more powerful than a mage's shield or a knight's limitless defense, not to mention that it could also be applied to other party members as well. Perhaps now, even standing in front of the tyrant and taking a hit, he might not get injured. With the skeletal armor maxed out, Lin then turned his attention to practicing the slow curse. As the skill level increased, the red glow became stronger and its coverage area wider. At level 21, the slow curse's maximum range had expanded to 105 meters, and its slowing effect had increased from 50% to 105%. Once cast, it could virtually turn most enemies into slow-motion figures. Lin tried using it on a desert scorpion, and the fast-charging creature seemed to move in slow motion. Satisfied, Lin noted that now only corpse explosion remained at a low level of 3. This skill was tricky to level up because it required corpses, and once used, there wouldn't be any corpses left nearby, making it difficult to practice further. Lin swiftly carried the last group through the dungeon, and then left the dungeon hall. There was still 1 hour left until the opening ceremony. Many students had already arrived. Charlotte and May left their dormitory together. Charlotte hadn't expected that when she chose a 2-person room, her roommate would turn out to be May, whom she had taken the entrance exam with. After spending a night together, their relationship quickly deepened. Charlotte, with a smile, declared that she would treat May to meals from now on. May didn't talk much, but she was still far more social than Lin. At least Charlotte could have a normal conversation with her, and their temperaments matched well. Standing not far from the two, they noticed Feng. He was clad in a long robe, a sword slung across his back, looking gallant as usual. Feng's demeanor was captivating, easily drawing the attention of the surrounding female students. Soon enough, Feng also noticed Charlotte and May, and walked over to greet them. Charlotte responded with a smile, commenting on Feng's popularity. Feng could only show a helpless expression. He found this situation quite troublesome himself. Seeing Feng's reaction, May changed the subject, asking if they had seen Lin. Charlotte shook her head, but was confident that Lin would surely attend. Feng nodded in agreement. Lin walked slowly towards the academy square. After the last run of the Tyrant Desert Dungeon, he had leveled up to 22. As he expected, the previous skill he had honed also automatically leveled along with his level. Lin understood the characteristics of his profession. As long as he trained his skills to the maximum level corresponding to his own level, his skills would level up along with him. After a total of 8 runs of the Tyrant Desert Dungeon, 6 of which he carried a group. Adding the points left after purchasing the scythe, Lin currently had 350,000 points. In Lin's eyes, this amount was far from enough. He did some calculations. An intermediate level skill scroll cost 80,000 points, and with 350,000 points, he could only afford 4. Given his now extensive list of skills, the chance of acquiring new skills had significantly decreased. He estimated that even 4 scrolls might not yield a new skill. Lin sighed, realizing he needed to find more ways to earn points. With a thought, he checked the time, noting there were only 30 minutes left, and hurried to the academy square. By now, almost all the freshmen had arrived. The opening ceremony was about to begin. The 3 friends were getting anxious. There were less than 10 minutes left. Charlotte was worried, wondering if Lin had overslept, but she didn't have a way to contact him. Suddenly, Feng looked in a certain direction and announced, "Here he comes! Lin is here!" Lin walked over steadily. The moment the 3 saw Lin, they could tell he had gotten stronger. They could even sense the lingering aura surrounding him, leading them to believe he had just come out of a dungeon. Lin's appearance drew the attention of many people. Many recognized Lin as the national top scorer, leading to various discussions among the students. Most of the students here have seen Lin during the exam. It was also Lin who saved them from the abyssal demon. Some looked at him with admiration, some with jealousy, and many others with fear. Charlotte waved her hand, signaling to Lin to come over. Upon seeing the 3, a rare smile appeared on Lin's face, and the aura around him instantly dissipated. Lin smiled at the group and nodded in greeting. Suddenly, May asked Lin about his level. Lin responded that he had reached level 22. Charlotte let out a shriek, quickly covering her mouth. Feng was also taken aback. How had Lin reached level 22? It's only been less than a week since the exam ended. How had Lin managed to level up so quickly in just a few days? Lin explained that he had been grinding in dungeons recently, but he did not tell the three that he had been carrying groups through dungeons. If he had been soloing the Tyrant Desert, he should be at levels 24 or 25 by now. Feng was aware that the academy had a dungeon hall, filled with numerous dungeons. Moreover, one could spend points to reset the dungeon cooldowns, allowing for repeated runs. Both Feng and Charlotte came from prestigious families, so they were well aware of the dungeon hall. In contrast, Mei was unfamiliar with it, so she stayed silent and listened attentively. Charlotte commented that earning points is difficult. Although Lin, as the national top scorer, had received a substantial reward, he shouldn't waste points carelessly. Lin didn't know what to say. He felt that while earning points was no easy task, but recalled that carrying a dungeon run could earn a substantial amount. As a bell tolled, the opening ceremony began. The students took their places, and on the stage, several professors and officials were present. One of them started his speech, welcoming all the new students to Xiajing Academy. He looked at the young faces in the crowd, acknowledging that they were prodigies from their respective high schools. However, upon entering Xiajing Academy, they would have to start from scratch. He didn't waste much time on formalities and went straight to the point. He informed the students that the academy was divided into three main sections: the General Academy, the Elite Academy squads, and the Top Academy squads. At Xiajing Academy, they would learn knowledge they had never encountered before and experience various dungeons and battles. The resources available to students would differ across the three sections. He didn't want to elaborate too much, simply telling the students that in Xiajing Academy, effort was mandatory. He encouraged all the students to strive and climb upwards. Observing the expressions of the students below, the speaker passionately continued his speech. He mentioned another tradition of the Xiajing Academy's opening ceremony, a much-anticipated event: the challenge segment between freshmen and senior students. Senior students could issue challenges to freshmen, staking their own points for the challenge. Freshmen could choose to decline, but if a freshman won, they would claim the seniors' staked points. Of course, regardless of the outcome, freshmen had nothing to lose. While it might seem somewhat unfair, this tradition offered freshmen a rare opportunity to earn points and allowed both new and senior students to gauge each other's strengths. High above in the clouds, several figures stood in the sky. Among them was White Divine, who commented that they always say the same things every year and wondered if they could update the speech. Since the previous day, Ning Tyran and White Divine had been at odds, with old Ning constantly beefing with White Divine. Ning Tyran huffed, pointing out that these freshmen were prodigies from various high schools, each with a strong sense of pride. White Divine, understanding his point, chuckled and wondered aloud if anyone would challenge Lin. At this, Meng Anwen wryly smiled and said that he doubted anyone would be so bold, especially since Lin's reputation from the dungeon hall had already spread among the senior students. The freshmen, without overthinking it, mostly saw the opportunity as a win-win situation. There was nothing to lose if they were defeated, perhaps even able to learn a few things from the seniors during combat. There's also a chance to earn points if they won. Some freshmen, however, considered the likely significant level gap between themselves and the senior students. Soon enough, they received an explanation. On the dueling stage of the academy, a magical formation would suppress the levels of both parties, aligning them with that of the lower-leveled participant. Skills were similarly adjusted, with any skills above level 20 being unusable if one of the parties is lower than level 20. As for safety, there was no need to worry. A protective magical array ensured that even a potentially fatal blow would not be life-threatening on the dueling stage. With divine-level healers present in the academy, the safety of all students was assured. The academy had thought of everything. Inspired, many began to show their eagerness to fight. The senior students all smiled, clearly enjoying this traditional event. Then, a senior student, a longbow slung over his back, stepped forward and challenged a freshman, also bearing a longbow. Some recognized the freshman as the top scorer from his province in the exam. Holding himself in high regard, he readily accepted the challenge. One after another, senior students began challenging the freshmen. This was a task assigned to them by the academy to knock a bit of the arrogance and pride out of these talented freshmen. Some accepted the challenges, while others refused. Of course, as one might expect, Jacob, the infamous clown, couldn't be absent from such an event. "Lin, I challenge you," he suddenly declared. Lin looked up to see Jacob issuing the challenge. Seeing Lin's silence, Jacob pressed on. "Lin, you are the top scorer of this year's national exam. Do you dare to accept the challenge, or are you scared?" He relentlessly pursued an answer, his taunting tone evident. "Ah, it's him again," Lin thought to himself. After several more taunts from Jacob, a flash of murderous intent appeared and then disappeared in Lin's eyes. Unfortunately, killing was not an option within the academy. Calmly, Lin asked how many points Jacob was willing to stake. Without hesitation, Jacob declared that he would stake 5,000 points. Lin shook his head, saying that's barely anything. Jacob frowned, taken aback that Lin would find his 5,000 points offer insufficient. After a thought, Jacob then demanded, how many points did it take Lin to accept the challenge? Lin raised a finger while saying, no less than 100,000. The entire academy hall fell silent in an instant. Even the most senior students here only have a few thousand points on them. It's rare to see anyone with over 10,000. Hearing Lin directly wager 100,000, Jacob's face was filled with disdain. What a joke. Do you even understand the magnitude of 100,000 points? Questioning if Lin even had 100,000 points. Lin didn't reply. Lin wanted to make it more interesting. Lin planned to make the stake points to whatever he had on him, stating that if Jacob won, Lin would give all his points to Jacob. Conversely, if Jacob lost, Jacob would have to compensate with an equivalent amount of points. Lin questioned if Senior Jacob is up for the challenge. Lin emphasized the word senior heavily, which greatly surprised Charlotte. It was rare for Lin to speak so much. It seemed that Lin had an ulterior motive. Charlotte was too familiar with Lin. The only time Lin would ever speak this much is when he had a special reason behind it. It seemed there was some beef between this guy named Jacob and Lin. Jacob began to hesitate. Everyone was watching him, waiting for his answer. He was the one who had initiated the challenge, and now he seemed afraid to accept it himself. Jacob felt provoked, knowing that declining would lead to complete embarrassment. Gritting his teeth, he thought to himself that a freshman couldn't possibly have many points. Recalling his own trump cards, Jacob decided to accept the challenge. Hidden in the air, the three chuckled to themselves. Shaking their heads at Jacob, they wondered how someone could be so foolish. Jacob must have heard about Lin busing students through the large-scale dungeons. Accepting a challenge without knowing the depth of your opponent, he's beyond help, Ning Tairan commented. After a few battles between the freshmen and the seniors, without a doubt, all of the seniors won. The crowd cleared the arena for Lin and Jacob. At this moment, the viewing stands of the duel arena were filled with many senior students. The moment the two entered the arena, their info was revealed. Jacob, 100-mile squad, level 21, Warlock. Seems like Jacob has left the Hidden Dragon squad and joined the 100-mile squad. Lin, National Top Scholar, level 22, Necromancer. Everyone present turned their eyes towards Lin, National Top Scholar, Freshman, level 22. What surprised them was not the National Top Scholar title. They had seen plenty of provincial and national top scholars in the past, but a freshman who was level 22 was something they had never seen before. Many senior students had either seen or heard about Lin in the dungeon halls, and quite a few had just been carried by Lin through the Tyrant Desert dungeon earlier. Some of them knew Lin was solo carrying large-scale dungeons lately, earning nearly 40,000 points in a single run. Who knows how many points Lin has now? Jacob was in deep trouble. The crowd in the stands buzzed with discussion. Everyone waited eagerly as if watching a good show. In the arena, surrounded by a magical array, the two of them couldn't hear the outside conversation. Jacob wore a cold smirk, mockingly saying, "What's so great about a national top scholar? In front of me, such a title is worthless." Lin calmly responded, pointing out that Jacob's level was lower than his. Jacob's face darkened. What Lin said was true. Although he had entered the academy earlier than Lin, his level was indeed lower. Persisting, he boasted, "I have had excellent talent ever since I was young. I entered the academy to cultivate my talents. Later joining the top academy squads, a genius like me is not something you can compare with." Lin, expressionless, repeated that Jacob's level was lower than his, making Jacob's expression even more sour. Enraged, Jacob shouted, "So what if your profession is strong? You just got lucky. On the real battlefield, combat awareness is much more important." Lin calmly pointed out once again that Jacob's level was lower. Jacob was furious to the point of cursing Lin's family. Lin's expression changed, and a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. His family is everything to him. No one was allowed to insult them. Jacob was startled by Lin's gaze. The very look in his eyes, he had seen it twice before, once during the Mermaid Dungeon Academy mission, and the second time in the dungeon hall. Did Lin wanted to kill him? Shaking his head, he dismissed the thought. They are in the academy, watched by everyone, and besides, Lin relied on his summoning skill and corpse explosion skills. Smirking, he informed Lin that he couldn't summon his creatures, and there was no corpse for him to utilize here. Lin said coldly in a deep voice, "If we weren't in the academy, you would already be dead," after which a skeletal warrior appeared by his side. The skeleton, wielding a great sword, charged at Jacob. In response, Jacob took out a purple crystal and crushed it. Transforming into a breeze, the skeletal warrior suddenly disappeared. Lin then realized that his summoning skills seemed to be sealed. Jacob burst into laughter, telling Lin that he was now rendered helpless due to the summon-sealing crystal, specifically designed to counter summoner-type professions. With his staff raised, flames surged, and he unleashed his most powerful skill. Jacob was expecting to see panic on Lin's face. However, Lin remained utterly calm. From the sky, even Ning Tairan, who had some complaints about Lin, commented on Jacob's unscrupulous tactics and criticized Jacob for using this item against Lin. Meng Anwen squinted his eyes, noting that the summon-sealing crystal should not be something Jacob could obtain on his own. All two of them suspected that someone was plotting against Lin behind the scenes. White Divine, on the other hand, was not worried at all. He knew that if anyone only considered Lin's summoning skills, they were gravely mistaken. They would pay a heavy price for underestimating Lin. In the dueling arena, Lin shook his head as he pressed his palm down, manifesting a layer of skeletal armor around himself. Jacob's fiery attack descended, enveloping Lin in flames and transforming the dueling arena into a sea of fire. Jacob laughed maniacally, expressing his relief that Lin had surpassed level 20. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to use this skill. His face contorted, and his voice grew shrill as he mockingly asked Lin how it felt to be scorched by the flames, thinking he was about to win. Lin walked out of the sea of flames leisurely, as if taking a stroll in a courtyard. The skeletal armor on his body shimmered, completely isolating the flames, even if Lin was now one level lower due to the magical array to match Jacob's level. For the level 21 skeletal armor, Jacob's attack felt less than a tickle. Jacob was dumbfounded. The outcome was entirely different from what he had expected. He screamed frantically, "How is this possible? This can't be happening!" Fireballs and ice arrows shot out from his staff, striking Lin, but they were all blocked by the skeletal armor. "Have you had enough? You are too weak," Lin said indifferently. Green flames flickered on his palm, and a spark fell onto the top of Jacob's head. A scream of agony filled the arena. Jacob fell to the ground, clutching his head and wailing in pain. Blood burst from his eye sockets and ears, and he began to gush out blood. Jacob looked utterly miserable. The next second, he disappeared from the dueling arena. Then, a beam of light descended from the sky, enveloping him. The divine-level healer from the academy began to treat Jacob. The healer looked at Jacob's pitiful state, thinking that if it weren't for the protective magical array, Jacob would have already been dead. The audience hadn't even grasped what had happened when they realized Jacob had already lost. They were preparing themselves for an exciting and breathtaking battle, but it ended just like that. After receiving treatment from the divine healer, Jacob finally recovered. Bloodstains were still on his face, and a deep sense of fear was evident in his eyes. When Lin's gaze swept over him, Jacob involuntarily shivered. It was only then that Jacob realized he had lost. But he was relieved to have been alive. As long as he was alive, nothing else mattered. End of the day, it was just a few thousand points. The dean came onto the stage and declared Lin the winner. After checking Lin's points, the dean's expression also showed a hint of surprise. Freshman Lin had won. According to the agreement between both parties, Jacob needs to pay Lin a total of 358,000 points, the dean announced. Jacob screamed and jumped up from the ground, unable to believe his own ears.